Hey guys, this video is going to be a little different than my usual response type videos. Now, my channel covers a wide variety of topics, of course. I always try to expand out to new topics as much as possible. And for topics I've already talked about, I usually try to find arguments that we've never heard before. I guess that's why it's so hard for me to find creationist videos to debunk, because they always just say the same things over and over again. And of course, out of these topics, there will be some I enjoy talking about, some I don't enjoy talking about, and I believe some topics are more important than others. Let's take Flat Earth for example. Sure, it's an interesting topic, but how much harm could they possibly pose? At most, it's just a gateway to other conspiracy theories. Believing the Earth is flat isn't going to directly harm society or other people in general. I don't care if you think we live on a pancake, or if you think the sun can somehow magically only light up a local portion of this pancake, so I give the Flat Earthers a D ranking. Creative, sure, but the threat level is too low. Preaching that the Earth is flat isn't going to actually kill people, you know? Unlike some other crazy beliefs like alternative medicine. Now, I'm sure we all have that one parent or grandparent who believes in alternative medicine to some degree. Something like drinking this soup will prevent you from getting a cold. Some of the misinformation has become so widespread that it's actually very common to believe. But these are usually for smaller things like fevers and colds. Most of the time, if a major accident or illness does arrive, people will still go to the hospital. People will still trust their doctors. Except for those on the extreme end, that is. There are people online who preach to others that doctors cannot be trusted and that alternative medicine is your key to literally everything, from the common cold to cancer. I say these people do pose a threat to other people. Convincing people not to seek proper medical treatment is putting those people at risk. I feel like this is the case a lot when it comes to cancer. People get frustrated, they get angry, and they complain about why they aren't getting better, or why we haven't come up with a cure for cancer yet. So it's very easy in this sense for people to turn to alternative medicine. Now, if people just kept these beliefs to themselves instead of making videos online convincing others to believe the same, then it wouldn't be that big of a threat. Sadly, there are those people in the extreme end that are willing to speak in front of a camera about this topic, and the more people who are convinced by their preaching, the more harm is done. Luckily, this isn't a very popular subject, and from what I've seen, not many people are that far in the extreme. Most people are still willing to trust their doctors. So as a result, I humbly give alternative medicine a B ranking. A big threat, yes, but it hasn't been too influential, I'd say. Of course, this is a very broad topic, which I'm lumping in all together. No matter if you think juicing can cure cancer, hydrogen water is better for you, or detoxing, I consider you part of this category. But there is a related subject that I do separate, which are the anti-vaxxers. It's kind of sad how we're seeing more anti-vaxxers than ever before. Diseases which vaccines are great at taking care of have been resurfacing lately. Of course, if you're vaccinated yourself, you probably don't have to worry too much about catching one of them. But those people who depend on herd immunity aren't so lucky. And you know, I think a reason there are so many anti-vaxxers today is partly because we've taken vaccines for granted. Let's be honest, you don't really feel the effects of being vaccinated because they aim to prevent, not to cure. Let's compare them to medicine that cures diseases, say antibiotics. You can directly feel the effects of antibiotics because you had to be sick first. You had to suffer first. Then this pill comes in and saves your day. To those, we don't doubt the effects because we can experience them directly. We feel their treatment powers. Vaccines are different though. They prevent you from getting the illness in the first place. And logically speaking, that's better because it's basically the same thing as a cure without the suffering part. But at the same time, because people don't feel the impact of the disease, they don't notice the cure either. So as a result, you don't get to directly experience the effects of vaccines, making it very easy to dismiss as not doing anything. After all, you never got measles, for example. How do you know that it's the vaccine that is responsible? And I think this ignorance is what makes it so easy to become an anti-vaxxer. They could claim that you didn't get a particular illness not because of a vaccination. It's easy to do that because vaccines only prevent, not cure. That's what I mean by taking vaccines for granted. Since anti-vaxxers have been quite influential and have actually successfully brought back diseases we thought were long gone, I also give them a B rank. Not an A rank because I think the solution is pretty easy. Just make vaccines mandatory for everyone. It's that simple. You don't get to put other people's lives at risk, including your own child, just because you're ignorant. That's just not how it should work, I'm sorry. Let's see what else. Chemtrails. People who believe chemtrails exist are sort of like flat earthers. It doesn't really matter if you think the government is maliciously spraying chemicals into the air. Spreading that belief to other people isn't really going to hurt them. I would put it as a D rank with flat earthers, but because it's less amusing to make fun of them, F rank. Next up, we have creationism, and I think I'm gonna lump this up with religion in general. Now, just like flat earth and chemtrails, I don't think creationists pose that big of a threat in general. Of course, this is not including the fact that it can serve as a gateway to other types of misinformation, because you can't really measure that. If you think God created the universe and all the plants and animals on Earth, be my guest. If you don't like the idea that humans share a common ancestor with all other living organisms, I'm not going to freak out over it. But the problem here is that so many people doubt the concept of evolution and common ancestry. Almost half the US population, to be more specific. God, why do I I feel like so many of these things are American problems. You don't see these types of things very often in other countries. It's such an embarrassment. People really need to start learning to trust scientists. Now, because there are so many people who believe in creation, this one is a bigger threat than flat earthers. We'll give it a C rank. Not as threatening as alternative medicine and anti-vaxxers, but a bigger deal than flat earthers. You know, I just wish that creationists came up with a few new arguments every so often. It's not very fun to debunk them anymore because you just hear the same arguments over and over again. But then, this is probably the oldest topic out of this list in terms of YouTube presence. I bet if I were around 10 years ago when this debate took off, I'd probably have a good time. But then again, I would also have been 14 at the time and would probably know nothing about evolution. Oh well, can't win them all. Finally, we have our last topic to rank, climate change. I saved this one for last because there's quite a few things I want to say about it. Firstly, this is certainly the one that gets me the angriest. When I hear people spreading misinformation about it, it definitely boils my blood. There's nothing better than straight up damaging our planet. Soon, we're gonna have some interstellar type shit where a fifth dimensional being opens up a wormhole to take us to a potentially habitable exoplanet. Anyway, this also seems to be mostly a US problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, climate change skeptics exist everywhere, but the US is most definitely the loudest. This is like the only country that really doesn't trust their scientists. Kind of pathetic. Now, climate change is a big topic and it's an advanced topic. Not many people are going to get it. Not many people are going to understand it to the same extent that climate scientists do. And I often find that ignorant people exist on both sides, but especially on those who deny climate change. YouTubers who have massive influences over their audience are spewing absolute nonsense about climate change. These people have hundreds of thousands of subscribers and can't even properly read a graph or interpret data within context. For example,
global warming, now euphemistically referred to as climate change, what with the fact that there's no evidence that there's been any global warming recently, this is data from 1996 to 2014, has become a very profitable international swindle.
No, computing forever, you don't just cherry pick a graph and call it a day. I tell this to everyone when it comes to climate change. Always check the source for reliability. When you do a simple Google search on temperature graphs, you get mixed results. That's partly because the method of measuring said temperature varies, but also because some of them are either unreliable or have been manipulated in some way. In this case, the data itself was obtained from a reliable source. It came from the RSS, but the data was obviously cherry-picked from a specific range. You don't just look at temperature over 18 years. That's obviously not enough time to make a judgment of overall temperature trends. That should have immediately set off a red flag for you if you knew anything about climate at all. Here's the graph using the same data, but it's not cherry-picked to only a small region. As you can see, there's a clear overall upwards trend. That's what needs to be looked at. You don't just zoom into a small region and say that warming doesn't happen just because you cherry-picked that out of the overall picture. That's number one. Number two, there was a slowdown in warming starting from 1998 that lasted for just over 10 years. That's the part that has been cherry-picked. However, there's good reason for that pause, and science has given explanations for it. The biggest one being El Nino, which for those of you who don't know, is an ocean current that has major influences on our climate. It can be very sporadic and changes the climate over a short period of time. The seasonal climate that it gave us during that part of the graph was a period of cooling, which appears to have counteracted the effects of global warming. El Nino can give us both warming and cooling. When it hits us with a warming effect, like where we see in 1998 with a big spike, it is usually followed up with a period of cooling, and that's what happened here. Now, El Nino wasn't the only factor. I covered this in a previous video talking about some other influencers in the 1998 cooling period. If I remember, I'll link it down below. Third of all, there are plenty of different ways to measure temperature. It's the most honest position to look at all of them. For example, the vast majority of the temperature increases go into the oceans, so measuring ocean temperatures is possibly more accurate. And just in terms of air temperature, there are still many different ways to measure them. So basically, climate change skeptics purposely cherry-picked the data from the RSS and presented it in a graph to make it appear as if no warming has occurred, when in reality, if you just zoom out a bit, you'll see that warming is indeed happening, and just had a short period of being idle. The area immediately before 1997 and after 2014 show clear signs of increased temperature trends. These climate skeptics purposely and maliciously skew the data in their favor. And then you have idiots like Computing Forever, who has hundreds of thousands of subscribers, taking those graphs and presenting them to his audience. Things like this can't be taken lightly. If you have such a massive influence on the most popular video sharing platform on the internet, then you should be fact-checking your sources before publishing videos. It's not hard. Now, it seems like I'm targeting Computing Forever, but there are plenty of other channels out there that spew out just as much, if not more, nonsense. Channels like Tony Heller, Friends of Science, and Red Elephant, for example. Look, the science is clear. The Earth is warming and it is caused by humans. It would lead to consequences down the line. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you what those consequences are. Making false claims and convincing people this isn't an issue will not help the planet whatsoever. We need to take action as soon as possible. What types of actions that should be taken isn't something I will cover today, but it's not going to be just a single factor that will solve this problem. We need to do a lot of things, but the first step to solving this issue is to first acknowledge that the issue exists, and climate change skeptics certainly aren't helping. Now, that being said, I don't think certain activists and people on the extreme side of the other end are also perfect. When the mainstream media or speakers say things that aren't true about climate change, like the Earth ending in 12 years or something, that certainly isn't helping the cause. And this is something I say a lot. Don't trust the politicians or the media. what? Trust the scientists. Because if you actually go in and read the scientific papers about climate change, you'll find that scientists have differing views compared to many of the extreme climate activists. If you're going out there and using emotion or exaggerating to present climate change, people aren't going to believe you and instead join the other side, which is not what needs to happen. Instead, you should be presenting the actual science of it, and don't exaggerate it to appeal to emotion. I see this being quite similar to social justice warriors. You take such an extreme position that people will meme the hell out of you, and then you find that you've pushed more people to the right side of the political spectrum, that ultimately you became your own enemy. And I feel like it's happening to some degree with climate change. There's no need to exaggerate it, there's no need to make false claims, there's no need to appeal to emotion. Just present the facts as science presents them. And if you're on the skeptic side of this, please read papers that have been published by scientific journals. Learn to distinguish between people who make extreme claims about climate change and scientists who are actually presenting the facts. Because if you do that, you'll realize there are some overlap, but many things are different. Once people learn to trust scientists instead of politicians and the media, that's when we can start making strides to solving this issue together. The truth of the matter is that climate change is happening, and we need to do something about it. Temperatures are increasing and ocean levels are rising. This is an issue that the sooner we acknowledge, the more damage we can prevent. Climate change skeptics are directly harming the planet, and because of that, they deserve the yes rank, for high influence and high amounts of threat. Wow, that's a lot of damage. And with that, our tier list is done. I probably should have done this back when everyone was doing it, but better late than never. Thank you guys for watching, and in the comment section, let me know. Do you agree with this list, or do you think it's bad? What would you add if I missed anything? Special thanks to Fireshark for his loyal support over at Patreon. I'll see you all next week.